Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Hi, I'm back, here to talk about the next key as we're looking at in this series, simple keys to soul growth. And what I wanted to focus on this time was worthiness and what that means for the soul, what that means for you, and as you're living your life day to day, and how we trip ourselves up. And this is somewhat of a continuation of episode 99, in which I was talking more actively about what happens for us that we don't feel good enough. And at the end of that episode, I said I would come back around and talk about this issue around worthiness. And I want to talk more about that. I want to talk about worthiness because I do think it ties into not feeling good enough. And I think what happens with worthiness, when we think about those qualities of worthiness, we think about deserving, having admiration for self and other people, admiring some type of qualities that they do have. There is some degree of specialness to who you are, and there's a valuing to who you are as well. So worthiness, I think, is something that we're striving for, but guess what? Many people have difficulties with worthiness, especially after the pandemic, when we were more isolated and we had less things to do. And it seems like it increased the amount of people not feeling worthy to have the goodness in their life. We saw increasing rates of depression. We saw even suicide rates increased in our youth. And we also saw issues around people feeling lethargic, not motivated. There's a series of things that happened for us during that time, and we're still experiencing some of that even to this day. And it ties into, some people would think about that time of the pandemic was a form of a trauma that happened. It created a shock to oneself, who, especially for those individuals who were more people-oriented and wanted more and was used to having a lot of connections. Now that shrunk tremendously, and now we have to do things virtually. And virtually doing things has its place, but it surely is not the same as having a person in the same room as you, interacting with you, engaging. There's just a different energy that happens with that. So when I'm talking about this notion of being worthy, there are many things that tie into why we won't necessarily feel worthy, as I just mentioned. But there are things that we also need to look at that may help us to tie and plug back in to a sense of worthiness. And one of the things I thought I would do first is continue to talk about the issues around unworthy and why that might happen for us. So it just gives you a little bit more of a context. Sometimes we don't feel worthy because there's a lot of self-doubt that's taking place. And when we're doubting ourselves, we're thinking there's the imposter syndrome taking place, and we're always seeing the lack in what we do, we don't feel lucky. And we sometimes kind of get into this notion with this imposter syndrome that we're a fraud, that people will spot us and people will understand that we don't have the attributes or the qualities that you originally said you did have. And so we don't realize that, but that is hitting issues on unworthiness, that we don't feel worthy to be in the position that we have, or to have the partner that we do have, or we feel as if the shoe's going to drop at any time. When's the next shoe going to drop? To show that they're going to find me out. But the other thing that ties into that is something I mentioned before, was sometimes childhood traumas do tie into that. And whether we get into feelings of depression and anxiety because of some of the trauma that happened in our childhood. So it may tie into why we don't feel worthy. Also, there's just this generalized anxiety and mental health conditions that make people feel unworthy, hopeless, helpless, unable to do it, feeling fragile at times. So I get it. There are things that tie into why we're not feeling worthy. And it also hits this whole notion of low self-esteem. And when we're not feeling worthy, then we're not going to have high self-esteem. We're going to have low, or we're going to have mediocre self-esteem. And so it doesn't move us into cultivating sometimes, because we don't know how sometimes, the qualities and characteristics that strengthen us, that we are able to see the good attributes that we do have. Because when we have low self-esteem, it puts this fog around us. It creates this haze around us in terms of us seeing our own abilities. Even though other people can see our abilities, we may not see our abilities. And then there is also perfectionism. We don't realize that perfectionistic tendency that we're having, it may be tying into not only having unrealistic and high expectations, and maybe even being a little bit rigid in our perspective about things, but also underneath that may be the sense of worthiness, whether we're worthy to be able to give ourselves a break, not be so critical of ourselves. Why do we need to continue to ride ourselves like a horse? Ride the horse until you're riding it into the ground, as they say. God forbid, that will not happen. And then there is also this quality that happens with unworthiness, in which we have difficulties with narcissism. We're so much self-absorbed at times that it's difficult to empathize with other individuals and to praise the goodness in the other individuals. Now you say, well, how does that tie into worthiness? Well, if we're so focused on ourselves, and we're always trying to have people look at me, and which narcissism does, look at me, look how great I am, look at what I did, look how I did it. Aren't you going to clap for me? Aren't you going to sing my praises for me? It may be at a deeper level, there's an issue around unworthiness, that you're having to have external validation and not an understanding of the strengths that already exist within you. So all that gets into limiting beliefs that we may have. And those limiting beliefs are tied into negative thoughts and assumptions that we're making that are not a correct lens by which we're seeing things by. So we're seeing the lens from the me perspective with what I just mentioned in terms of the doubt of oneself, or the trauma that has happened with us earlier, and the anxiety that we experience, or the low self-esteem, or the perfectionism, or the narcissism. Is all revolving around in this kind of pull of me, the pull of me. And we have to be aware of the fact that get out of that pull, because the pull is not helping you. It's just sinking you into suffocating the trueness of who you are and suffocating your soul. Because your soul is like, no, please help me here. That's not the way in which we want to go. And if you're walking a spiritual path, you need to be able to put up a stop, like a hand, and say, just no, I'm not going to continue to think that way. No, I'm not going to continue to feel that way. I'm going to figure out, and start doing a new way of being for myself. Because ultimately what the soul knows, which we have to become more conscious of, is that we are worthy. We are more than worthy. We came from God and we return to God. The actions and the behaviors, yes, they can change and we need to alter them. We need to correct them, do a course correction when we've said something that is not appropriate, or when we engage in behavior that you know was hurtful or spiteful or mean-spirited. Yes, we need to correct that behavior, but does it mean that we're not worthy of God's presence in our life, worthy of goodness in our life? No, that doesn't mean that at all. But we have to be aware of the fact that we attract certain things to us by our vibration, which I talked about in some other episodes, and even episode 99, that we attract to us. So the universe is always trying to help us to understand what is it, our reality. Because I said way back in, one of the first episodes is our attention informs our reality. Where we put our attention to informs our reality. It's as if, our attention is like the sun shining through a magnifying glass, and a high intensity magnifying glass. And it's so intense that the ray is kind of burning that paper because that magnifying glass is so intense. So if we are always intensely focused on the things that relate to being quote unquote unworthy, which I just mentioned to you, then it does create doubt and uncertainty. It does create us more a sense of, wow, what do I do? I feel very small and insignificant. But that is not the soul. The soul is very significant. And as you heard me say, it is the substance of your life, your soul. And what your soul wants you to focus on is learn what you need to learn, which you hear me say again and again and again. But we can easily forget when we're in such an intense situation that has happened to us, that we've had a significant loss that has happened to us, or we've had a significant academic failure that we thought we were going to get that A in the class and it ended up being a D. And what happened, and so it moves us into saying, well, maybe I wasn't worthy because the professor didn't like me anyway. And so, I don't get good things come my way. Well, that might be true. The professor didn't like you, but it doesn't mean that good things cannot come your way. And when we really want to dive into this situation about unworthiness and our attention being placed on that, it creates a vacuum. It not only kind of had a magnifying glass that can burn and create a fire, but also it can create a vacuum of a sense of who am I? It creates a void of what am I about? Because we have our attention sometimes so focused on trying to get, trying to win, trying to accomplish, trying to do things. To help the world or the person in our life that we feel is significant to us, or our parents, or that particular coworker to understand and see, I do a good job. I am worthy. But those are the external things that you're trying to get people to see. But we first have to go to your internal self and anchor in your internal self and get comfortable there. Get comfortable in understanding of who you are, what makes you tick, what are your values, what are the beliefs that are helping you, what are the beliefs that are hindering you. All those things need to be looked at. We got to look at where do we find our attention we keep on going to. And, each of the days that we move through the week, what am I thinking about? Why am I thinking about those things? Are those things I'm thinking about, are they helpful to me? Or they're getting me further outside myself, trying to please, trying to make sure people like me, trying to make sure people accept me. And that creates that outward, external, extended focus, creates a void because we think at some level that internally we don't have what it takes. Only when people validate us, then we know we're okay. Then it soothes us. But what about soothing your own soul and your own self and just saying, you know what? I may not have done it right that time, but I'm going to get better at it. and having conversations with your own internal self, your own soul, and hooking your soul up to its God source. God, you know what I need to do here. Show it to me. Help me to guide me, because God knows all things. God is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient. God knows all things, and we can ask for God's guidance and direction in our lives, which helps our soul. And it ties us into more substance that is more real, that is more true than sometimes these external validations that we're seeking and looking for. So worthiness for the soul is really anchored in the awareness that God exists within me and is around me and is always guiding me. It will be silent. It will be active. It will be what it needs to be. God in my life will be what it needs to be to help me to see certain things, guide me in certain ways. And the more that I put my attention to, I am worthy. And when we don't feel worthy, then we say, make me worthier still. I am worthy. Make me worthier still. Because it means that we're always evolving, we're always growing on this planet. We will always be able to say, I can do it better, or I can do it better, and I can do it better. And so we can always do better, but we also are satisfied to know that we're anchored in something greater than ourselves. We're satisfied to know that the substance of our life is tied into the holiness of God. The holiness and righteousness. And the righteousness is the right use of energy, of God's energy. So we're more aware of how do we think about this situation? How do we feel about this situation? What are we doing in terms of behaviors in the situation? Are they worthy in God's sight and God's eyes? Are they worthy of the behaviors we're engaged in? And if they're not, then we make the course correction. We don't get into this, what I said in one of my other episodes, CCJ, criticism, condemnation, and judgment of yourself. You just make the correction and just say, thank you for that awareness. I am no longer doing that particular behavior or engaging in that particular type of thought or feeling. I am learning. And that's the ultimate game on planet Earth. Are we learning from our experiences? Are we being aware that there is the substance within us, that substance, that spiritual substance, that spirit spark, that Atman, the I am presence, that exists, that the soul is trying to move back towards on his or her path to that godliness. So we can again say, oh Lord, make me worthier still. I am worthy. Make me worthier still. Let's say it together. I am worthy. Make me worthier still. We're in the process of being and becoming. Being and becoming. That's the beauty of the plasticity of being on this planet. We have the flexibilities. We can change. We can mold our reality in a particular way by our attention, by our beliefs, by our feelings, by our behaviors. We can create different reality if we don't like the reality that currently exists. And when we focus on the soul and what the soul's needs are and how we can continue to advance on our spiritual path, and we ask to be given guidance and seek guidance from other individuals, be it a minister or from a friend that is trustworthy, or from a coach or a counselor that you believe that can support you and help you to move through the situation that you're going through, to help you to garner the skills or to practice certain skills that you're trying to have a little bit more underneath your belt. Those are all things that help us to keep on the right path, the worthy path, the path that says God loves me and will continue to love me. But what God does want for me is continuing to grow. and to learn from the situations that you find yourself in. Not build up resentment, not build up anger, not build up disdain, not build up criticism, not feel deflated, but instead take those situations and see how you can make them, as the old saying goes, stepping stones, as opposed to stumbling blocks, in your awareness of your worthiness. Yes, we can have parents that keep on telling us, well, you're not good enough, or you don't, that was a stupid thought or idea or decision that you made. There are those, that can be in one's life that are very critical. But as we become into adulthood, we have to look at those and we need to be able to say, I don't choose to accept that any longer. I will develop my skills. I will develop my talents. I will start journaling about what I know about myself, get to know me, and not through the lens of a parent or a guardian who was negative, but through the lens of what I know that I was going to be helpful for me in my growth and advancement. And as you grow, your soul grows. Your soul moves from the dormant state of just kind of being around to an active state, to giving you hunches, helping you to intuitively need to do is in your best interest. But I think it's like this combination of you working on being your best and God helping you where he sees, oh, we can help her or him here. Get a better sense. Or I can help somehow. Let's get this person to meet this person over here. Then they'll have a better understanding about this particular issue they both asked about. Which is in kind of the light of God is trying to be able to do. I think there's always these unseen forces that are really positively working for our good, working for wanting us to figure out the better way to go, the higher way, the higher path to go on, that allows us to understand that one of the qualities of worthiness is love. When we love ourselves, then we can learn to love others. And when we learn to love others, we are finding that it's easy for us to serve and to give of ourselves. And when we give of ourselves, then we find that we are truly now being in the flow of where God wants us to be, when he wants to be there, and doing the work of the Lord. What happens is the quality of unworthiness, which I'm kind of alluding to here, or maybe be more blatant about, is the love quality. Unworthiness, or even the quality of feeling that you're not valued, or you're not feeling that you can't make a difference, or don't know how to make a difference, or haven't figured out if you want to make a difference. But by you loving you and understanding how to love, how to show appreciation, how to sing the praises of the Lord in gratitude, how to use these positive qualities to be anchored now in a sense of calmness, wholeness, completeness in yourself, then we start to heal ourselves and heal our unworthiness. And our soul starts to speak to us and guide us and give us direction. So the bottom line to worthiness is love. The bottom line to worthiness is gratitude, being grateful. The bottom line to worthiness is appreciation. And the bottom line to worthiness is self-acceptance. You accept the glory of God that exists within you. You meditate on that glory. You read about that glory, be it the Bible, be it through something inspirational, be it something you see on the YouTube, but you attract yourself to those qualities that are godlike. You read stories that are godlike. You anchor in the awareness that I'm not here alone on this planet. There are many people walking a spiritual path. There are many people who are learning about themselves. So get involved with some of those groups that are out there that can help you to stay anchored in the greatness of who you really are. And that is what we all are trying to keep our focus around, because it is so easy to get into these vibrational, lesser vibrations of unworthiness, of not feeling good enough. It's not that at all. You are already born with inalienable rights through God, your creator. And what we're trying to do is not forget that, to remember it. So when these thoughts or these issues come up for us, we want to shift gears. It's like the old saying I said, and I may have said in one of my other episodes, is that a bird may land on your head, but it doesn't have to build a nest. And so the thoughts, the feelings, reactions is building the nest. And if they're not the right ones, and they're not in the frequency of worthiness and appreciation and gratitude and godlike qualities and Christic qualities, then we shake it off. We shake our heads, say, no, not here. And keep moving. And keep focused on what you want. Because we sometimes too often focus on what we don't want. And what we don't want is usually some of those unworthy things we don't want. Yeah, it's like, no, what do we want? And let's figure out how to get that. And stay focused around that. Something to think about. And again, you are worthy. I am worthy. Make me worthier still. Think about that. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.